Okay, so let's go ahead and walk ourselves through a trademark search. And again, this is just going to be covering a basic trademark search, showing you how to use the new, updated, more user friendly system that the US Patent and Trademark Office released not too long ago. The old system, which you can't really access anymore, was very challenging and intimidating, to be perfectly honest, to a lot of laypersons, people who were not trademark attorneys who are used to doing searches and understand how to do Boolean operations and navigate a mostly text based search option with weird layouts for all sorts of things. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the links to these websites will be in the description, so no need to try to look and see if you can find where it is or how to get to it. I'll provide the link, so all you have to do is click on it and you can get straight to it. So, once you get to the link that I'm going to provide in the description, you'll be at the main search page. And if you click here where it says Trademark Search System, the big green button, it will drop you into the trademark search. So, to do our search today, we are going to use a very common, famous brand name so that way you can see some of the results and we don't really have to make up something to try to figure out how we're going to do a search. We'll just use something that most people already know, and then you can see how the results work. So when you get into the main search page, you are greeted with a few options here. You have a search by all, which you can drop down and you can search for the word mark, goods and services, the owner, serial number, registration number, mark description, and search by field tag. Now, most people, if they're just trying to do a basic trademark search, to try to figure out whether or not the thing that they are thinking about registering is even remotely possible. Most people are going to start with a word mark search, but you can do search by all if you want. You're just going to end up getting a whole lot more results. For example, if you're searching for a certain word and the owner of a completely different registration has that word as their name or even part of their name, those things will show up as results. And so we want to try to avoid that. So if you really want to do just a basic search to say, hey, is that word, is that name, is that phrase that I'm thinking about registering available, you would probably click on word mark. So we're just going to search for the word mark. Now you have additional options here, basic and expert. I'll touch on expert in a little while. It's not as intimidating as the word expert might make it seem. But for now, let's start with basic. And we're going to search for, well, as you can see, I've already been messing around with it, preparing. We're going to search for Nike, the shoe brand most people know. Now, when we search for Nike, we get a bunch of things. And again, remember, we're searching for the word mark, not the owner, not anything else. And so let's first start with this left hand side because that might be important for you. It gives you options here, check boxes, to filter out the results. And you have live, and underneath live, you have registered and pending, and then you have dead, which also goes to canceled and abandoned. And I'll briefly explain what these things mean so that you can choose how you want to do your search. Now, most of the time, you will probably only want to search for live because that will let you see if there are any marks that exist that would definitely and clearly bar you from being able to register yours. Now, you have registered and pending. Registered means that it has gone through the entire trademark registration process. They submitted their application. It was reviewed by an examiner from the USPTO. That examiner said that it was okay. And then the person provided proof that they are actually using it in the sale of goods or services to the public. It was presented for objection from the public and pass through that phase. And then, as the final result, the USPTO issues registration. The other option underneath live is pending. Now, what pending means is that someone has filed an application and that application is in some state or another, meaning it may have just been filed and has not been assigned or reviewed by anyone. It may be in the review process. It may have been reviewed and sent back to the applicant for more information, or was potentially refused and a letter was issued saying, hey, it was refused for these reasons. If you have a good explanation and can convince me, the examiner, that the reasons why I refused it are not valid, I'll listen to what you have to say and may reverse it. So, pending could be many different things, and it does not necessarily mean that it is just waiting for someone to provide proof that they're using it or something like that. It could show pending just because someone filed an application and it hasn't even been looked at by anyone yet. Now, if we go down to dead, that, well, means what it indicates. This means that this is a filing or registration that is not active. So there are two reasons why this may be the case. It could have been canceled because the person was not using it, or they were supposed to file a proof of use after 5 years and maybe they failed to do that either because they just did not know they were supposed to, they forgot to do it, or it could be that they simply stopped using it and there was no need to file anything. Or it could be that someone has said that, hey, this person should not be entitled to the right to have this registration for this trademark, and so I'm going to petition for it to be canceled. The other way that something could be dead is if it was abandoned. And abandoned essentially means that someone has failed to maintain their registration for whatever reason. And because they missed so many deadlines or possible extensions or whatever the case may be, that person's application or registration is now dead and the trademark office deems it to be abandoned. And this could be someone who, for example, had a pending registration and maybe the trademark office said, yeah, we don't think that this is registerable, but if you have a good explanation, you can provide us with that and we will change our minds. And perhaps the person never provided that and the time slipped by and they missed the deadline. And so that pending application may have gone into abandoned status. Or they said, hey, your application is approved, but we need to see proof that you're actually using it before we can move on and register it. And the person may have simply not provided proof. Maybe they weren't using it, maybe they missed the deadline, who knows? And then it goes into abandoned status. Now, there are reasons why you might want to search for dead trademarks, especially abandoned ones, because if you are trying to register something that may be controversial or is very close to the edge of an existing registration, you might want to actually look just for abandoned registrations to see if any of those were abandoned because the register mark owner of the trademark that you are worried about may have actually filed paperwork to stop that person's application from going through. And that will give you an indication if that's something that you might be able to expect if you file a application that is maybe on the edge of being too similar to someone else's. But for now, we're going to unclick that and we're just going to look at live registrations. So again, I searched for Nike just for the word mark and we have 67 live registrations. Nike has a lot of dead registrations because of old terms that they may have used or logos that they use and then abandoned or many different reasons. And so what you can see as we scroll down is that we have a mix of words and pictures. The pictures indicate that this is a logo that the applicant has registered. And very often the words are indicating that this is just a word mark that the person registered. not necessarily in a stylized version, like up here where we have this ACG Nike and it's in the little triangle, and that's a logo. If we scroll down further, we get the, of course, very famous Nike logo with the swoosh underneath it, registered for the goods and services of retail footwear and apparel store services. And that's in class 42. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But while we're looking at this, we can see that we get a lot of information from each of these little boxes. We see the actual logo, or in the case of a word mark, the word that's registered. We see whether or not it's live and registered. We can see the goods and services that it applies to. So in this case, retail footwear and apparel store services. We can see what class that fits into, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We can see the serial number. So this is the number that you could look up if you wanted to go straight to or directly to this registration if you wanted to ever find it again. And we see who the owners are: Nike Incorporated, which is a corporation registered in the state of Oregon. And of course, we can see for all of these, at least from what I can tell from a quick scroll, they are all, for the most part, Nike Inc., registered in Oregon. Although we do see something different. If we look here, we see Nike registered in Class 7 for the goods and services in Category 23, mechanical and hydraulic lifting jacks and hydraulic pistons. And this is registered to Rehoboth Hydraulics AB, a corporation in Sweden. Well, how can that be? How can they use Nike, which everyone knows, as a major global brand for footwear and athletic gear and stores and all sorts of things? How can they use their name? And this is where we get into the reason why we search and why we try to rule out certain things. And the main reason is it's in a completely different class of goods and services than the Nike shoe brand, the Nike athletic brand operates in. They don't make hydraulic lifting jacks or hydraulic pistons or whatever other things are part of this description after the little dot, dot, dot. And so as a result, someone is able to and has actually registered this mark for a completely different class of services. And that tells us that if you want to register a trademark, there is a greater likelihood that you might be able to push that registration through without any problems with either the USPTO or possibly with the mark owner if it is for a completely different class of goods and services. And so that there is no way that the general public would confuse this company of Rehoboth Hydraulics and whatever they're using this Nike term for their hydraulic lifting jacks. People would not assume that Nike, the athletic apparel company, will be making hydraulic jacks. You just don't think that when you think of the brand Nike. And so as a result, this company was able to register that with this particular type of product. So let's look at one of the famous ones, the Nike swoosh brand registered for footwear and apparel store services. Now, if we click on this, it brings us to another page, and this is the TSDR page. This gives you all of the detailed detail work. Now, believe it or not, originally the trademark search page looked somewhat similar to this in terms of the layout, where it was, kind of not user friendly, not really great um, user design. But on this page, we can see lots of information. We have these little click down arrows. We can find out the basic information. It's a drawing, an illustration drawing, which includes words and letters and numbers, and the goods and services, which we already saw on that original page, class 42, footwear, and so forth. And then we have other things, basic information, the attorney who filed it, the uh, the staff person who was assigned and worked on it. And if we click on documents, we can see lots of things going all the way back to 1983 when this was registered. And we can see the registration certificate and other things if we click on it. I'm not going to go through all of that right now. We don't want to make this video overly long, but it allows you to see lots and lots of information. And you see here where over the years, they filed additional specimens to continue their registration so that way, as they go through this, as the 5 and 10 year marks line up, they file continued registrations to prove that they were actually still using it. And therefore, they should be able to maintain their registration. And so, this is a little bit different than patents, a little bit different than copyrights, which have an expiration date. Trademarks, as long as you are using it in the way that it was designed, exactly as it is, and as long as you're using it in the same class of goods and services, you can keep it for good, forever, as long as you maintain it. And so that's why a lot of corporations own the marks, because the corporation can exist potentially, forever. And therefore, they can continue using it forever and maintain ownership over this mark forever. So that is the basic search. Now, if we wanted to go into expert, that opens up some more options here. So now we get a class filter and it opens drop down already. And we have all these different filters, these different classes numbered, and also A, B, and 200. Now, what these are the different types of services that are offered by the trademark office to categorize the various different ways that marks can be used. And we saw, before, the hydraulic presses, the retail footwear and apparel, various different types of clothing, restaurant services, computer goods, all sorts of different types of categories of goods and services that pretty much encompass every type of way that you can present a product to the public and use it. Now, a way that you can find this is the TMNG, which is a trademark ID manual. And you can do a search for the master list. Now, let's just say that I want to search for shoes. We'll keep it simple. Now, this pops up all sorts of different things. Number one, we have class 25 just for shoes. And then we have class 18, leather goods for dog shoes. Class 28 for toys and sporting goods for snowshoes. 25 for clothing, hockey shoes, leather shoes, handball shoes, and so on and so forth. And you can scroll on and on. And some of these are extremely long. Some of these are not. We have building construction and repair, cleaning of shoes. So lots of different types of categories. So if you wanted to search for just shoes, we can jump back over here, and we saw that shoes was in class 25. And we can narrow down class 25, but it also gives us options for coordinated. These are classes that often have related services, so that even if you say, well, I just want to use this for shoes, sometimes the trademark examiner, when they look at your application, might say, yeah, but shoes is also related to different types of apparel. And so that gets us into maybe advertising a business for that type of apparel. Maybe it gets us into jewelry as something that you wear, leather goods, which goes along with shoes, leather shoes, for example, fabrics that go along with the shoes that go into it, and other things, computer scientific thing that you can turn this off if you want, and you can look at just shoes. So is the word Nike registered for just shoes in the class of 35, which is clothing? And it is. So shoes fall under class 35, which in general is clothing, and that includes t-shirts, hats, hoodies, sweatpants, any type of clothing item that you can put on your body, it falls into that. And so even though you may only want to make it for shoes, if someone has registered it for other types of clothing, you may end up with a problem in trying to do your registration. And so we can see here that, of course, Nike is registered for many different marks for shoes and other types of clothing, sleeves worn apart, athletic footwear for this type of logo, footwear for this different type of logo, the Nike Air Vapor Max for footwear, athletic and casual clothing. And so all these different types of subcategories of related clothing items that are within the general clothing category of class 25. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe. There will be more videos coming that will explain more expert types of searches so that you can really narrow things down, how to search for abandoned marks to see if you may have problems in doing your trademark search. But the one thing that I want to leave you with that is very important to understand is that doing a trademark search can be a very complicated endeavor. And what I just showed you for doing a basic mark search on the new trademark search system is really to help you to maybe do what's called a knockout search to say, is there something that is directly competing with what I want to register? There are many different aspects that go into doing a full trademark search that a trademark attorney like myself would do. Ways that we consider things that the examiners look at, such as, do they look similar? Are they pronounced or sound the same but are spelled differently? And other types of things that trademark examiners look for to determine if something may be confusingly similar to something that's already registered or pending registration. So I definitely advise you to seek the help of a trademark attorney if you are looking to move forward in the process. But if you want to save a little money right from the first step and say, this thing that I'm thinking about, did somebody already register that exact thing? Well, what I just showed you will definitely suffice.